Today I'd like to share some tricks that you may find useful when debugging JavaScript in Chrome. So let's get started. So basically, here I'm going to have a breakpoint in some script. And if I just do this step into the next function call, it is going to go into some Google code that is not mine and I don't need to debug. So what I can do is I can just say black box script, and next time when I come back here, it's going to skip over that. So let's just trigger the breakpoint again and see if it happens. And I'm going to try to do that. So if here you can see the breakpoint has been hit, and I'm going to say step into next function call, and see it didn't go into that black box scripts. So I find it pretty useful because sometimes you really don't want to be debugging third party library code, and this is a perfect way to do that. If you somehow want to bring this back, the script you had black box, you can go into customize and control dev tools and go into settings and look for black boxing, and see here is my script and I can delete it, and now you'll be able to step into that script. So that's actually pretty useful. Another thing I wanted to share that typically I use in JavaScript and also under React, I can create a stat class, and I can essentially add a static method such as log, and which will basically take in all the parameters. So here what I'm checking is if it's in development mode, then do console.log, otherwise don't do it. So that way, if I run my script, for example, right now you would see some logging being done on the console, and I can just check it. Oh, let's remove this breakpoint here for a second. So you can see there is some logging being done, and this logging is happening because we are in development mode, as you saw, uh, because you are checking for that node environment is development, and only then we are doing some logging. So this can be useful because at runtime you won't take a hit, because in your app you'll just be calling util.log and you won't have these logs in production mode. So I find that useful. Another thing I found that useful when doing the console, you can actually set some for your logs. If you want, you can set some colors. So let's say I wanted to just select this, and I type console.log %C, and then here it is almost like CSS style. So if I do this log, you could see that it's going to come out in green. So you could actually do this with your logs. You could have different types of colors and stuff like that. Another thing that I find sometimes useful is to obviously use console.warn, and this is a warning, and it's in yellow, and you can obviously do console.error, which is going to be error message, and this is obviously going to be in red. So that's another thing. Another thing is if you're timing some critical function, you can also use console.time. And to do that, what you can do is come up with a name. So I already have something. Let me see if it works. So basically what I have is console.time yogi, and I'm doing something in console.time end, and see what this does. And you can see this piece of code took about 0.37 milliseconds. And basically what you do is for the start you create a time console.time, and you end the same thing with console.time end, and it will essentially time that information for you. Another thing that I find sometimes useful is to look at the performance monitor from the console, and you can check for things like CPU usage. And suppose, let's say, if I'm playing this video, I can still see that the CPU usage is not going up. So this can also be pretty useful in the console, the performance monitor. You don't need to have it up all the time, but sometimes it also might be useful. So as I discussed about black boxing, console.functions, and some timing functions, and those can be pretty useful. And you can also try some settings under network conditions. So if you wanted to use a user agent which is selected automatically, instead of automatically, you can select a user agent, and if your server is looking for that, that can be pretty useful. Now, another thing that I find useful sometimes is to use some sensors, and the sensors would basically be some kind of a geolocation to you. If your app is sensitive to that, you can set a geolocation, and you can try that also. You can also try some orientation, which it can be useful. I don't really try it and use that much. You can also actually try request blocking, and you can say if some requests are blocked, you can add a pattern here. For example, let's say if your request has YouTube and you want to block it, and if you wanted to try and see what is the net effect of that, you can see it says 13 requests have been blocked, and that's actually pretty interesting. So you can see the request here, all the gets are actually getting a 404, for example. If I go in there, you can check the headers, the preview, fail to load response data. So that actually can also be a good test for how you're doing certain things. So this is actually a pretty good way to do lots of stuff in this, and especially if you have an HTTPS application, I would recommend going into the security tab as well and check for mixed mode request as well. So there are a lot of interesting things in the Chrome DevTools. So I'm going to basically add this in a video on my website under Gaur Associates. And what I'm going to choose is basically Chrome DevTool debugging. And thanks for watching this short screencast, and you have a great day.